Okay, so what if I told you there was a practice, really quite simple to learn, that's actually been tested, rigorously tested by modern science, and it's shown to, well, really enhance your emotional resilience, help stabilize your most difficult relationships, and this is the kicker, potentially even slow down cellular aging. It sounds a bit like some kind of, I don't know, secret spiritual hack, maybe, but it's not. It's actually this ancient non-theistic method. It's known as loving kindness meditation or sometimes meta meditation. So today we are doing a deep dive, looking closely at the specific sources you sent over. Our mission here is to really cut through the noise, understand exactly what this powerful technique is, walk you through the precise step-by-step method for cultivating this kindness, and uncover what the science, the modern research actually says about its, well, pretty remarkable benefits. Measurable benefits.
Yeah, and that context is so important because loving kindness meditation, or LKM, it's much more than just trying to feel good. It really is an ancient Buddhist practice. It's actually the first and the most foundational of what they call the four Brahma Viharas, the four divine abodes, you could say. Right, so these four are meant to be cultivated together. You've got metta, which is this unconditional goodwill, universal friendliness. Then there's compassion, genuine wish to see suffering lessen, appreciative joy, which is being happy for others' success, and finally, equanimity, that kind of non-reactive balance when life throws things at you. LKM, the metta, it's the foundation. Because without that basic friendliness, the others just can't really flourish properly. The core goal, it's about fostering an open and ultimately a fearless heart.
I find it really powerful how the teachings frame this. It's not positioned as some like airy-fairy retreat thing. They call it a radical act of self-care. And maybe even more importantly today, an essential way to maintain sanity in this world that just feels like it's accelerating, getting more chaotic. And the mechanism behind it, that's what surprises people, I think. It's not about complex visualizations or anything. It's really straightforward intentionality. You're using simple, repetitive phrases, maybe some images, and really deeply felt intentions. You're sort of repeatedly planting these seeds of loving wishes, right into your heart and mind. And the goal isn't just, a fleeting moment of peace during the meditation. The real aim is for that loving, friendly heart to become your baseline, your background state for everything you experience, every encounter.
Exactly. And what makes the method feel so radical, especially, for those of us maybe raised in cultures that really prize achievement over self-acceptance, is where the practice absolutely insists you start. It begins with you, yourself. The foundational teachings are incredibly clear on this. If you can't generate kindness toward yourself, or maybe if you just refuse to acknowledge your own basic worthiness, then the kindness you try to extend to others, it's always going to be a bit fragile, maybe conditional. You just can't pour from an empty cup. Or worse, a hostile one.
Right. So practically, what does that look like? A practitioner sits down, gets comfortable, tries to relax, maybe allows their heart space to soften a bit, and then they focus their attention inward and gently recite these phrases, taking them in one by one. Can you maybe walk us through those traditional phrases, the ones aimed at the self?
Absolutely. And they're designed quite deliberately to cover the fundamental needs, really, of any human being. You direct these wishes toward yourself. And the key is intending them to be true, really wishing them for yourself, regardless of how you might be feeling in that exact moment. So the phrases usually go something like, may I be filled with loving kindness, may I be well in body and mind, may I be safe from inner and outer dangers, may I be happy and at ease.
Okay, now this is where, the rubber meets the road for a lot of people. For many listeners, and I include myself here, the first time you try this, it feels, well, awkward, maybe mechanical, or even worse, right? If you struggle with that inner critic, trying to genuinely say, may I be happy, might just bubble up feelings of irritation or even anger, because maybe deep down you feel you don't deserve it. So if that initial attempt at self-love brings up those difficult negative feelings, what's the specific advice? What did the teaching say? Is the goal to force the feeling? Or is there a way around that resistance?
That resistance is completely normal. Actually, it's often a sign that you're starting to touch on some old ingrained patterns, and you should absolutely never try to force the feeling. That's not the point. The crucial teaching here is to be patient and kind. kind towards whatever feelings are coming up, even the difficult ones. You're simply receiving those feelings, the irritation, the sadness, whatever it is, but holding them in a spirit of friendliness. You're being kind to the resistance itself. And the practical advice, if directing it towards yourself feels genuinely too hard right at the start, the guideline is simple. Follow the path that most easily opens your heart. It is perfectly fine, actually quite common, to begin the practice by focusing on a benefactor first. Think of someone whose love or care for you feels undeniable, easy to connect with. The idea is to generate that feeling, that warmth of loving kindness first. Once you know what that feels like, once it's activated, then you can gently try redirecting some of that warmth back towards yourself.
Ah, okay. That makes a lot of sense. It's pragmatic, isn't it? You're not just ticking boxes on a checklist. You're trying to cultivate a state of being. So once that initial state is established, maybe towards yourself, maybe towards that benefactor, that's when you begin the systematic expansion, moving the circle outwards.
Exactly right. And this structured, graded expansion, that's really the genius of the LKM method. It helps guide the practitioner from that feeling of internal isolation towards genuine connection, but without feeling totally overwhelmed by it all at once. So the first expansion, as you said, is typically the loved one or benefactor. You bring someone to mind who has genuinely loved you or cared for you. Could be a friend, a parent, a teacher, even a pet sometimes. And you direct those same phrases outward to them. May you be filled with loving kindness. May you be at ease and happy. And this part usually feels good, right? It reinforces that warm feeling. Then the next step, you systematically move to the neutral person. This is someone you see maybe, but don't really know. The cashier at the store, a neighbor you just waved to, someone on the bus. You don't have strong feelings either way, positive or negative. And this step, it requires a genuine, impersonal act of universal friendliness. It pushes the feeling beyond just your immediate circle, your attachments.
And then we hit the big one, the challenge. Directing loving kindness toward a difficult person. An adversary, even. This is the phase, I imagine, where a lot of people might just think, nope, can't do this, and drop the practice altogether. I mean, I get the rationale intellectually. You hear that it's done to help me release my own resentment. Fine. But when I actually try to focus on someone who has genuinely hurt me, or maybe someone whose views I find totally abhorrent, isn't there a huge risk that I just get sucked back into anger or rage, or just replaying painful memories? What specific advice do the sources give for handling that initial, emotional spike when you try to bring kindness to your greatest challenge?
Yes, that is absolutely the most common friction point. And the advice here is quite nuanced, very important. First, you have to be crystal clear about your intention. This practice, when directed at a difficult person, is not about forgiving them. It's not about condoning their actions. That's a whole different internal process, forgiveness. This isn't that. The purpose of metta towards an adversary is purely about your liberation, self-liberation. Because when you hold on to resentment, hatred, bitterness, you are the one bound to that person. You are the one getting hurt by that constant internal fire. It damages your own peace, your own health. So by offering metta, even just a sliver, you're primarily recognizing their basic humanity. The fact that they too, somewhere deep down, suffer and desire happiness, just like you. And in that small recognition, you start to create a little distance from your own consuming pain. You loosen the knot. Now, crucially, if that spike of anger or hurt feels too intense, too overwhelming, you stop immediately. You pause that part of the practice and gently return your focus to yourself or to the benefactor until you feel stable and grounded again. The key is never to force it, never to push through intense negative emotion. You're nurturing a quality, not fighting a battle within yourself. The sources kind of imply it's like fighting fire with water. The goodwill, the metta, eventually cools the internal burn of resentment.
Wow. Okay, that distinction is not forgiveness. It's self-liberation that feels like a fundamental game changer. That makes it approachable. So once you've navigated that potentially tricky emotional terrain with a difficult person, the practice then culminates in the universal embrace.
That's right. This is where you dissolve all the boundaries. You let the feeling expand outward indefinitely. You consciously include all beings, everywhere. Your friends, sure, but also strangers, animals, political leaders you agree with, leaders you disagree with, people who are sick, people who are suffering. those near, those far. You might even extend it to the planet itself, the whole cosmos. The intention becomes boundless. You might use a phrase like, may all beings near and far, all beings everywhere be safe and protected and free from inner and outer harm.
That cosmic perspective is, well, it's kind of overwhelming, but in a good way, put things in perspective. But let's just circle back one last time to where we started. If the practice ultimately embraces the entire universe, why did the sources insist so strongly that the first person, and maybe the touchstone you keep returning to, must be yourself? If the goal is this universal selfless thing, why the intense focus on I and me at the beginning?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it gets right to the heart of why we call that self-focus a radical act of love. The underlying concept is that you are not actually separate from the universe you're embracing. You're part of it. And therefore, you are just as worthy an object of kindness, compassion, and goodwill as anyone else. Critically, your own well-being directly impacts the well-being of everyone you interact with. We sometimes use the metaphor, engaging in that initial self-kindness is like tuning your instrument before you play music for others. And what does tuning mean psychologically? It means building your emotional capacity, your bandwidth, your resilience. If your own instrument is constantly frayed by self-criticism or depleted by chronic stress, then every note you try to play out in the world, every interaction is going to be strained or off-key. So that self-focus ensures you actually have the emotional energy, the well-tuned capacity to genuinely show up for others with generosity and stability. It's profoundly practical, not selfish.
That reframing really clarifies it. Self-kindness as capacity building. Okay, let's pivot now to the hard data, because this is where the sources delivered some genuinely surprising findings, things that go way beyond just, feeling a bit calmer after meditating. The science is suggesting that LKM is literally physically optimizing the machinery of our body. Let's look at the mental and emotional health category first. The data here seems pretty strong, quite consistent across studies. LKM is associated with a really marked reduction in self-criticism. And that internal critic, that's the engine for so much of our suffering, isn't it? It seems to lower self-harming impulses too, and significantly boost positive emotions, things like joy, contentment, gratitude, hope. And studies are confirming that regular practice can be a really effective tool for managing symptoms related to things like social anxiety, problems with anger, depression, and even long-term trauma like PTSD. It's like it gives the brain a new emotional habit to practice, a pathway of friendliness that can slowly start to override those old habitual pathways of fear, threat, and self-attack.
Absolutely. And then if you look at relationships, the impact seems quite direct as well. It doesn't just make you feel better in isolation, it seems to help you relate better to others. Regular LKM practice is linked to increased feelings of social connection, improved empathy even towards strangers, which is interesting, and research shows it can lead to greater stability and satisfaction in your long-term social bonds. But, as you hinted, the truly fascinating stuff, for me anyway, comes when we look at the biology, the physical benefits. These suggest this practice is fundamentally shifting your physiological reality, not just your mood. For instance, there's research showing LTM can buffer the shortening of telomeres, which effectively means it might slow cellular aging. Telomeres, those are the protective caps on the ends of our chromosomes, right? Chronic stress, especially unmanaged negative emotion, wears them down faster. That's linked to aging and disease risk. So the profound insight here is that cultivating positive emotions, cultivating this kindness, isn't just mind stuff. By reducing that internal friction, that chronic stress response, LKM seems to literally protect the physical integrity of your DNA.
That is just astonishing, really. And I saw multiple references in the sources to an increase in something called vagal tone. Can you maybe briefly explain what that is and why it matters for someone just trying to feel better day to day?
Sure. Vagal tone essentially refers to the activity level, the strength and responsiveness of your vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is massive. It's often called the body's information superhighway, connecting the brain to the heart, lungs, gut, basically managing your internal state. Think of it like the body's natural braking system. It controls the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest, calming response. So high vagal tone means your body is efficient and quick at calming itself down after a stressful event. It makes you more resilient. LKM practice appears to strengthen this vagal tone, so it becomes a reliable physiological marker that's directly linked to subjective well-being, better emotional regulation, and even better physical health outcomes. Essentially, you become less physiologically reactive, more physically resilient to stress.
Okay, so we're not just thinking our way to calm, we're potentially biologically strengthening our internal capacity to handle conflict and stress, which might explain the final surprising finding, this link between LKM and pain management.
Precisely. There are studies suggesting LKM may help reduce symptoms of certain chronic pain conditions. Things like chronic low back pain, maybe migraines. Why would that be? Well, a lot of chronic pain isn't just about the initial injury. It's amplified by an overactive, sensitized central nervous system. A system often stuck in high alert due to fear, anxiety, and stress about the pain itself. So by systematically calming that nervous system through LKM, by generating friendliness towards yourself, maybe even towards the pain sensation itself, without fighting it, you can gradually help turn down the volume on that pain signal. You desensitize the system.
Fascinating. And we shouldn't forget the traditional wisdom, right? The insights that came long before fMRI machines. The Buddha apparently attributed 11 classic benefits to practicing metta regularly. And these went beyond just emotional states. They included things like physical protection and better rest, sleeping well, waking up refreshed, not having bad dreams, even being regarded with affection by people and animals, strangely enough. So whether you focus on the cutting-edge biological data, slowing aging, strengthening your nervous system, or you lean towards the ancient wisdom, the core message seems remarkably consistent. Loving kindness meditation is this profound yet practical practice for cultivating inner strength, emotional resilience, and genuine connection. And it seems the key, always, is the intention behind the phrases. That sincere wish for well-being, for yourself and others. That's what seems to shift the mind, and maybe even the biology, not just mechanically repeating words.
Exactly. So as we wrap up this deep dive, maybe consider this fundamental, quite provocative rationale behind metta. The idea that love and fear simply cannot coexist in the same moment. That generating genuine goodwill inherently banishes fear. So in an age often defined by stress, division, uncertainty, if it's possible that simply sitting quietly, intentionally generating kindness is enough to start cultivating an open and maybe even a fearless heart. Well, this raises an important question for you, the listener. What tiny targeted step could you take today, maybe even just for a few quiet breaths, focusing only on one simple phrase, like, may you be safe? Could you apply that one loving wish just briefly to the most challenging person or situation currently in your life? Not necessarily for them, but maybe, just maybe, for the sake of freeing yourself from the internal burden of resentment. Think about where that small, radical act of love and self-liberation might begin to lead your own capacity to thrive.